Hi, you are watching Global Insight on Voice of Canada, and this is Sana Haroon. A wildfire in Spain, which broke out Wednesday night in the mountainous Sierra Bermeja above Estepona, continued to rage on Friday, forcing the evacuation of more than 1,000 people and has so far burned more than 3,600 hectares.
Yeah, it's the first time I see that in my life. But the police came and said, you have to go. I said, give us to take few things at least. No, you have to go. So we took nothing.
No.
Also for the baby, I had to buy everything new now for him to get into the kindergarten. Lois bought something new because everything's still in the house.
Fatal, yo, la persona que ha hecho esto, lo que sea, fatal. Es que se ha cargado esto bonito, las vistas, yo lo estaba pensando, las vistas tan bonitas, los árboles, los animales, montones de animales que hay, de gente que tiene los campos por ahí que no han podido ir. Es que es un desastre. Y es que sigue pasando, es que ya no es la primera vez, es que pasa y pasa y pasa.
Moments after the September 11, 2001 attacks, planes were grounded and thousands of airline passengers unexpectedly found themselves in the town of Gander, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Don't let the stubborn fog fool you. Gander prides itself on being an airport, not an outport. But there was no way to know what was coming on September 11th. In all, 38 planes landed here, almost 7,000 bewildered passengers in a quiet town that was home to just 10,000 residents to begin with. School bus drivers who'd been on strike drove the so-called plane people to school gymnasiums converted into makeshift hotels. Gander's hockey arena became a warehouse for stacks of food and drinks, and the laid-back charm of the town and surrounding communities soon put their distraught guests at ease.
One guy said to me,
A study released this week in the Canadian Medical Association Journal shows young users of cannabis are more at risk of heart attack.
Cannabis, a coping mechanism for many Canadians, especially during the pandemic.
Cannabis can affect things like your heart rate or even blockages in your heart.
Kareem Ladha worked on a study looking at the relationship between cannabis consumption and heart attacks.
Individuals who are using cannabis were about twice as likely to have a heart attack compared to those who weren't.
The study, released in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, is based on surveys done in the US with people 18 to 45 years old. Ladha says the study finds consumption amounts to be a factor.
The more that someone used, the higher the risk of having a heart attack.
And alternatives like edibles and vaping didn't reduce the risk by much.
It wasn't simply just smoking the cannabis that was causing the heart attack, but rather maybe something inherent to cannabis in and of itself.
He says the study is meant to draw attention to the link between cannabis and heart attacks, and more in-depth research is needed in this area. Dr. Andrew Pipe from University of Ottawa's Heart Institute agrees.
Much more research underway.
Canada legalized cannabis use in October 2018. Pipe says legal cannabis consumption is still new and research is slim, so it's hard to tell if cannabis alone is leading to heart attacks.
Many people who smoke marijuana regularly and heavily also smoke conventional tobacco products.
Or have other risk factors such as age, family history, substance abuse, obesity, and cholesterol. But those factors aside, he says consuming cannabis in general will have negative side effects.
There's no question that smoking anything constitutes a hazard to your lung health and also a hazard to your heart.
Professor Sean Varani says cannabis can take a toll on a person's heart.
It can increase your heart rate, it can increase your blood pressure, it can increase the amount of demand for oxygen.
We often hear people saying that smoking cannabis is healthier than smoking tobacco.
Either tobacco or cannabis could lead to stiffening of the blood vessels, that could lead to a stickiness of the blood elements.
He says discussion on all levels in Canada will be richer if we have more funding for research in this area.
A large percentage of the population is using cannabis, and as such, I think we have a responsibility to study it.
It's been 20 years since terrorists hijacked commercial planes and launched an attack on the United States that killed nearly 3,000 people. As Jennifer Johnson reports, the pain of this day remains 2 decades later.
Christy A. Adamo.
The names of the lost were remembered at the Ground Zero Memorial, every one of the more than 2,700 people killed in New York on the morning of September 11, 2001. 2 moments of silence were held to commemorate when each plane hit the towers. U.S. President Joe Biden attended the somber ceremony, along with former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. 2 decades have passed, but for those who lost loved ones, it seems like yesterday.
In the last 20 years, my family and I have at times known unbearable sorrow and disbelief about the lives that would never be.
Firefighters remembered the men and women who died trying to save the lives of others, a city still healing 20 years after the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. In Shanksville, Pennsylvania, bells were rung in remembrance by the 2 emergency responders first on the scene after United Airlines Flight 93 went down as passengers tried to stop the terrorists.
There's one thing to say, I know I should step up, another thing to do it. That's genuine heroism.
President Biden chose not to give a nationwide address on this day, but Americans did hear from former President George W. Bush, the nation's leader on 9/11.
The world was loud with carnage and sirens, and then quiet with missing voices that would never be heard again.
A ceremony was held at the Pentagon, too, where terrorists crashed American Airlines Flight 77 into the building that houses the country's top military leaders.
Never forget those who were murdered by terrorists. Never forget those who rushed to save their lives and gave theirs in exchange.
This anniversary comes less than 2 weeks after America's chaotic end of the war in Afghanistan that began after 9/11. A war that killed mastermind Osama bin Laden but left behind other extremists. America's defense secretary, who fought in Afghanistan, promised the job is not over.
It will always be our duty to fulfill their missions and to live up to their goodness.
20 years later, Americans are concerned that al-Qaeda, the terror network behind the 9/11 attacks, will regroup in Afghanistan. The pain of this day remains fresh in millions of minds. With renewed fears, something like this could happen again. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
From the ashes of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon rose America's longest war. A grieving nation sought to find those responsible and stop another attack. 2 decades later, the end of the U.S. mission carries far less clarity. Afghanistan is back under Taliban control. There's not a single U.S. troop on the ground. For many veterans and their families, this September 11th feels more painful. Grief mixed with anger and one lingering question. Was the war worth it? Jill Stevenson's son Ben was just 13 when he watched the Twin Towers fall. From that point on, he vowed to serve his country, becoming an Army Ranger. He was killed in a firefight with the Taliban in 2009 at age 21. Dr. Shelley Amen served in the U.S. Army before becoming a psychiatrist who works with veterans.
People are feeling it acutely right now.
On this September 11th, she encourages veterans and their families to find support and know that healing is possible.
You know, they're really feeling like their post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms are flared up. They're feeling a deep sense of betrayal in a lot of ways.
Nearly 2 decades after he left Afghanistan, that's what motivates Tom Amenta. He has worked to document the stories of those who served, hoping to use this grim anniversary to remember what was gained, not lost, in America's longest war.
After breaking out as a star at the US Open, 19-year-old Canadian Lyle Fernandez was defeated in the final round. Another teen, Britain's 18-year-old Emma Raducanu, defeated her in a nail-biter of a match. But as Mike Drollett explains, Fernandez's future is bright.
Teenagers slugging it out in the US Open final. Has Gen Z arrived or what? On one side of the net, Montreal-born Leylah Fernandez, and on the other, the UK's Emma Raducanu, who was born in Toronto. For 2 weeks, they've captivated New York's fickle tennis fans. Sadly, the magic had to end for one, and while Fernandez fell short in the final, she's still only 19 years old. Fernandez was a long shot to get here, but nobody can say she didn't earn it. Nice! Her family made sacrifices. With finances tight, her mother moved to California to work for 3 years, which allowed her dad to coach her, and she stayed focused, even as the naysayers tried to convince her to quit. While, not that she hasn't been all along, and begin reaping the rewards, provided she proves she has staying power.
But will they continue to be at that top level?
We've seen it before. Eugenie Bouchard looked like the next big thing, until she wasn't, and lost big deals with Coke and Nike. It's now Leylah Fernandez's turn to play with fame. Let's hope she serves up an ace.
And Dr. Dread, Canadian actor Joshua Jackson plays Dr. Christopher Dunch, a man currently serving a life sentence for the maiming and death of his patients.
It's important we are in and out with as little fanfare as possible. So, mouth shut, ears open. I had missed the story when it had first happened. It kind of caught me off guard when I first, how the outcomes happened, but how he happened. Like, how the hell does a person like this come to be?
He turned him into a quadriplegic.
Work ethic was second to none.
Ooh, Ted Bundy was a good worker too.
We all make mistakes.
But not you.
Like, if somebody just created this story out of, if this was a pure piece of fiction, I think you'd be like, nah, it's too much. Like, nobody would ever get away with this, and nobody's that outlandishly bad at their very crucial job.
Dunch has 2 deaths. Texas has executed people for less.
All due respect, Dr. Kirby, you don't understand the law.
You don't understand who we're after.
Dunch is never gonna stop on his own.
And my brain wanted to reject it because I don't want to believe that there are doctors like this out there, because I don't want to ever find myself in a position where I'm like getting wheeled in thinking to myself, are you competent? Are you going to mangle me? And then is the whole system going to try to pretend like you didn't just mangle me? Once you introduce the profit motive into medicine, you get all sorts of distorted outcomes. And up here, while there's definitely money to be made, ultimately the patient supersedes the profit, because there's only so much money inside of the Canadian system to be made. And the American system is the exact opposite, right? As soon as you walk through the doors of any care provider, you are a potential profit center. And so it just warps what doctors prescribe, therapies, medications, it just warps the entire system. And unfortunately, if Dunch had been practicing medicine in a different state that didn't have as regressive laws as Texas has, then his patients may have been more expensive than him. But because he was practicing in Texas, the cost of mangling those bodies was an acceptable loss for the hospitals, because actually dealing with Dunch would have been more expensive. And since they had chosen that profit is more important than their patients, it was an acceptable loss for him to continue to mangle human bodies, because that was less expensive to them than dealing with Christopher Dunch. And that is so up. Yeah, no, there's not a lot of, I mean, in some moments I hope that you find yourself compelled by him, but he's definitely not a charming rogue. Well, I mean, thank God. It wasn't that part wasn't by design or intention, but thank God. I mean, there were times where playing this character was quite heavy, and I don't even think I recognized it until I finally finished it. Quite how intense the experience was, but thank God I was coming home to a happy home and a happy, healthy baby, because I mean, yeah, it would have been a lot of heavy drinking last winter if it wasn't for the happy family life. I was conscious of the fact that it was wearing on me psychologically by the time we were getting towards the end of the show. And then, like I said, once I actually finished it, I mean, literally the next day, we finished it, I had an unbelievable night's sleep, and then woke up the next day and was like, wow, I did not realize just how literally heavy, how intense this thing was sitting on top of me. And knowing that I don't have to go back and be inside of this man's psychology anymore is a real relief. There's a price to be paid for every character. Happy, sad, doesn't matter. To play a person without empathy is it's uncomfortable. I mean, there's a lack of humanity inside of him.
Since seizing control of Afghanistan last month as the US withdrew from the country following a nearly 20-year war, the Taliban has tried to convince the world it will respect women's rights.
This is the demonstration the Taliban wants the world to see. Female students fully veiled carrying propaganda signs in English celebrating the Taliban's decision to allow women to attend university. Afghanistan's Minister for Higher Education made the announcement with some caveats. The teachers have to be women and not all courses will be taught. The Taliban tasered and beat this group of students who expect education as they know it to end.
For female roles in society and female behavior, for instance. So, you know, I suspect there'll just be an indoctrination exercise.
Much of this was expected. The Taliban are trying to appear legitimate, so girls have been allowed in school provided they're separated from boys. But it's also precarious. Members of Afghanistan's all-female orchestra have gone into hiding because the Taliban hate music. It remains unclear whether it will be forbidden as it was 25 years ago. And the question remains if ultimately the Taliban will try to form a legitimate government or rule through violence.
As your interior minister, it sends a very clear message that violence, terrorism, you know, somebody who has a $10 million bounty on their head by the United States, there are carrots here and there are sticks. And they've clearly put somebody who wields a very big and hard stick in charge as the interior minister.
After 40 years, the wars may be over, but the internal conflict remains.
Fans pulled off the biggest catch of the night at a Miami Hurricanes college football game on Saturday, when they used an American flag to break the fall of a cat that fell off the upper deck of the stadium. North Korea's state media said on Monday that the country had successfully tested newly developed long-range cruise missiles over the weekend, the first known testing activity in months, underscoring how the country continues to expand its military capabilities amid a stalemate in a nuclear negotiation with the United States.
미사일 활동이 재개되고 있는 중 이러한 문제를 근본적으로 해결하기 위한 북한과의 대화 또 관여, 외교가 시급하다는 것을 잘 보여주는 것이라고 저는 봅니다.
And regarding the announcement that North Korea has conducted long-range cruise missile launches over the weekend, I don't intend to speculate on what the intentions might have been with those launches, but I would reiterate Australia's consistent statements that have called on the DPRK to make a sustained commitment to talks with each of the Republic of Korea and with the United States.
In this body-worn camera footage released by the Wichita Fire Department in Wichita, Kansas on September 10 shows us what it's like as a firefighter trying to put out a fire that's consumed an apartment building.
She's on the scene. We got smoke showing. Go ahead and upgrade second alarm. Command, first floor. We need help up here. Command, start EMS. Main body of the fire is going to be on 2 with extension up to the deck on 3. I need somebody to pull a second line to the Charlie side and start washing that down. 93 to my safety. Red fire tank. We got 2.5 in place on floor 2. Good for you, 2.5 in place on floor 2. He's 11. We got the second line. We're going to move up to the 3rd floor with the second line. We got a primary in the fire department. I'm heading up to meet you now. Command fire tank. Fire department on 2 is knocked down. You're going to keep the 2.5 here. We can move up to help on 3. Command truck 2.
Parts of Texas started seeing heavy rains and high surf early Monday morning and into the afternoon as tropical storm Nicholas began to move inland, with water officials warning the storm could make landfall as at least a Category 1 hurricane.
The state of Texas began preparing for this days ago, making sure that we were mobilizing all the supplies and support and resources that were needed by all the different local officials in all the various regions. It seems like every time we have heavy rain in the Houston area, there are people who do drive into high water, and they sometimes lose their vehicles and even worse, sometimes lose their lives. Your life is the most important thing that you have. Be cautious as you travel about the Houston area and the Harris County area for the next few days. Listen to local weather alerts and heed local advisories about the right and safe thing to do, and you'll make it through this storm just like you have many other storms.
The first all-amateur crew to orbit Earth without an astronaut bot returned safely on Saturday after a historic mission.
A Dragon continuing to descend.
The SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule made a splashy entrance back to Earth with 4 space tourists aboard.
Inspiration 4, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home to planet Earth. Your mission has shown the world that space is for all of us.
No professional astronaut was on this trailblazing 3-day trip to space. 38-year-old billionaire Jared Isaacman chartered the flight, paying undisclosed millions for himself and 3 guests.
So a big part of our mission here at Inspiration 4 is to inspire what can be done here in space.
Isaacman aimed to raise $200 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, donating $100 million himself. SpaceX founder Elon Musk donated another $50 million. One of the tourists aboard was a St. Jude physician assistant who was a bone cancer patient at the hospital nearly 2 decades ago and did some research, inspiration for her young cancer patients who did a question and answer session with the space tourists.
Can you fall into space since there is no gravity?
I have to say that floating is, I don't know if you saw it, I always call that peanut M&M. Floating is so much fun.
What's your favorite space food?
My favorite space food is pizza, which I had yesterday.
Looks like a smooth ride for the crew.
The capsule literally ran circles around other space tourism competitors, going 161 kilometers past the International Space Station and orbiting the Earth 15 times a day. And there will be more. Early next year, 3 businessmen paying $55 million each will fly to the space station, accompanied by NASA astronauts.
Keep watching Global Insights on Voice of Canada. For further updates, visit our website voiceofcanada.tv.